I'll talk a little bit about some of the process that we've been using to gather input for really a number of years from thousands of people. But you play a particularly important role because you are respected leaders in our community who have tremendous background and skill in particular areas. But you also have your ear to the ground in the community and have a sense for what people are saying they want in life, what they're concerned about, maybe specific ideas for this project. So we want to take advantage of that and kind of mine your experience a bit. So we would hope that you can be a voice of some in the community, bring some expertise, but also help us look broadly at the long-term benefits of the state and the region in this area. So I think what we'll do, let's just go ahead and have some introductions. We'll go around very quickly because I think it'd be helpful for everyone to get a sense for who is here and who's participating. We'll then throw up the agenda, walk through the agenda, and I'll give you a little background after that. But I'm just going to go through the participant list here. And I'll start. I'm Alan Matheson. I'm the Executive Director of the Point of the Mountain State Land Authority, which is overseeing the planning and development of the point, which is what we're calling this 600-acre site currently occupied by the Utah State Prison. So I'm just going to go down. Muriel, why don't you introduce yourself?
Muriel Sochmil, President of X Factor Strategic Communications. Our firm is helping to provide communications consultant support to Alan and the Point.
I've got Advisors Consulting. That's Todd, I think.
Yes, thank you. Good afternoon. Todd Brightwell with Advisors Consulting Services. We are a national vocation advisory company, and also I have taken on the role of Executive Director for the new Utah South Economic Partnership, which is geographically encompassing Utah County, and then as well as Draper, Bluffdale, and Harriman.
Thanks, Todd. Aaron May from SOM.
Hey everybody, this is Aaron. I'm the project manager for SOM, and you'll meet the rest of the team momentarily.
Great. Mike Hathorn.
Unmute there. Mike Hathorn. I am a community and urban planner. I have my own consulting operation called Community One. And I have a particular specialty in dealing with zoning and entitlement work, primarily on the development side, but I have done work on the public side with municipal governments. And I'm excited to get to know all you folks.
Thank you, Mike. Carolyn Wood, please.
Hi, I'm Carolyn Charette, and I'm the Executive Director of American Preparatory Schools, and we're an education consulting firm. We manage 6 Utah schools right now, about 5,300 students, K-12.
And one that's right in our neighborhood. So, thanks.
We have 3 Draper campuses, so yes.
Yep. Great. Christian Gardner.
My name is Christian Gardner. I'm president of a real estate and renewable energy company, Gardner Company, and serve on the University of Utah Board of Trustees.
Thanks. Clay Christensen.
Hello, Clay Christensen. I'm president of Mountainland Technical College. We're one of the post-secondary institutions in the Utah system of higher education. So glad to be included on this project. Thank you.
Thank you. Chris Lee.
Hi, I'm Chris Lee. I'm the Executive Director of Bike Utah, Utah's statewide bicycle advocacy organization. And I'm here to lend the voice of cyclists and what we're interested in seeing happen here and hopefully help make connections that need to happen.
And as a cyclist, I'm so glad that we've got you participating. Thanks. That's going to be a big part of what we do. Dustin Jansen.
Hi, Dustin Jansen. I'm the director for the Utah Division of Indian Affairs.
Thanks, Justin. Gordon, hey.
I'm with Harriman City, and we're excited to see the point moving forward and want to see how we can help benefit ourselves as well as all the residents in this area. So thanks.
Thanks. Jack.
Hi, Jack Hedge. I'm with the Utah Inland Port Authority, and really excited about being part of this effort as we move forward to decarbonize logistics and goods movement in Utah. Really excited to be part of this and part of this group with Point of the Mountain, sister project of ours. So, thank you.
Thanks, Jack. Appreciate you participating. John Bowers.
Yes, thanks, Alan. Hello, all. John Bowers, Director of Partnership with Silicon Slopes. Very glad to be part of this crew and invited to help out, and anxious to help in any way we can, representing here at Silicon Slopes and the state in general. Appreciate it.
Thanks, John. Appreciate you being here. Leah?
Hi, I'm Leah Jaramillo. I'm a public engagement consultant, and I am working on the SOM team for the framework master plan process.
Michael Gallegos.
Good afternoon. Mike Gallegos. I'm with Salt Lake County Division of Housing and Community Development. And primarily my role there is in housing affordability and community improvement.
Thanks. Peter, would you introduce yourself? You'll be speaking later.
Hi, everybody. My name is Peter Kindle. I'm with Skidmore, Owings & Merrill. We're the firm that is leading the master planning effort of the site.
Thanks. Robin.
Hi, everybody. I'm with Carbaugh Associates. We focus on regenerative planning, design, and public policy. Lately, we've been working in the area of food systems and equitable food environments.
Thanks, Robin. Glad you're here. Saki?
Hi, everyone. I'm with Skidmore, Owings & Merrill. I'm an urban designer, also working on the point with Peter Kindle and Aaron May.
And Shivam?
Hey, this is Shivam. I'm a co-founder at Brixton Partners. We do commercial real estate. We are developers. We build flex industrial warehouses, and I'm from Draper.
Perfect. Let's see, Stephen Alfondre.
Hey, Alan, thanks for having me. My name is Stephen Alfondre. I'm a founding principal of Urban Alfondre. We're developers. I have a background in urban planning and real estate, and we hyper-focus on walkable communities. We've toured cities all over the world with a specific interest in missing middle housing. We obsess with different floor plans and product types to deliver to people things that they want today. Really grateful to be here and be a part of this.
Tara?
Thank you. Tara Rollins from the Utah Housing Coalition, and thank you so much for inviting me to participate. The coalition is all about housing people can afford and making sure that we have the right inventory for, our lowest income people that are really the backbones of our economic development. So thank you.
Thank you. And Troy?
Hi, I'm Troy D'Ambrosio. I'm the Executive Director of the Lausanne Entrepreneur Institute at the University of Utah and an Assistant Dean of the David Eckel School of Business. Looking forward to working with everybody on this project.
Thank you. Well, I went through the list I can see, but names were moving around. Did I miss anybody? Okay, I think we'll move ahead. Muriel, would you put up the agenda? I think you've seen this agenda. It was sent out, but want to kind of walk through it at this point and just give you a heads up on what we're going to do. So we've completed number one, the welcome and introductions, and then I'm going to very shortly go into providing a little background on this project, high-level overview, and share a little bit about what your role is. We'll then turn to our consulting team from SOM, and they'll provide kind of an overview of our process, the kinds of things we're trying to accomplish and when, and how you'll be involved. We'll then have a little opportunity for some discussion, some questions. And then we'll jump really into the meat of the matter as SOM will start outlining some of the studies that they've been doing as they've been thinking about different design contexts, different scales, different ideas, and how they might start fitting together to accomplish the range of goals that's been set out for us at this project. We don't want to take too much time with that, but we think it's important and that it'd be helpful for you to be able to have a sense for where we're going and what we're seeing and what we're thinking. And then the real heart of the meeting will be some opportunity for you to provide some input on some of these ideas. And we've got a little exercise that we put together to facilitate that. And then we'll wrap up and get you out of here by 4 o'clock. So with that, I'm going to take over the screen here and share with you some background that I hope you'll find useful, and we'll have an opportunity for some questions. First of all, a little video, and then I'll share a PowerPoint with you.
Most people in the state know that the existing correctional facility at the point of the mountain is going to be moved, which means that this land is going to be available for development. That area will be known as the Point.
The new prison is expected to be completed in mid-2022. At that point, we'll start looking at demolition of the site and site preparation for development.
There's really not much like this anywhere in the world, where you have 700 acres located in a densely populated area in the heart of Silicon Slopes. This is unlike anything we've seen in the history of the state of Utah, and a rare opportunity in the United States or anywhere in the world.
We have one of the most vibrant technology scenes in the country, maybe even the world. The epicenter of Utah's Silicon Slopes is really at that prison site. And so we'll have the opportunity to have this blank slate that can be programmed to help accelerate additional growth, additional opportunity, so that we can see a major campus form there, a campus that's environmentally sustainable, that is focused and centered around research and innovation, that is a job center, that allows people who live and work in the site to access the beautiful outdoors that we have here in the state of Utah.
Our approach has been to think big. The Point will be impressive. This will be a unique place for innovation, for technology, for research and vibrant growth, with an eye towards quality of life, transportation, air quality.
This will be a place that is not just about corporations or buildings. It's about community. It's about people. There'll be some residential and commercial. Certainly, we think it's important to have recreation and open space.
We want to make sure that future generations look back on what we did here and they can be proud of those decisions, making sure that it doesn't impact traffic negatively, that it doesn't impact air quality negatively, that this can actually be a model for future development so that we can add people without lowering the quality of life and diminishing what makes the state the best place to live, work, and play.
The reality is that we're not going to be able to stop growth, but we can grow in ways that preserve what we value most. That's our commitment to this site.
The people of Utah want this to be a very sustainable development that draws on the best technology. It could be a showcase piece for our entire country. it will create new educational opportunities, new employment opportunities, and it will only enhance the quality of life here.
We don't have a plan for this site yet. We want it to be open to the public so they can see what we're doing and have input into the process. Tell us what works, what doesn't, how we can improve it.
The dream is that this will be something that is unique and something that every Utahn can be proud of.
We would rather be right than fast on this project. The citizens are part of this decision-making process. It's not just the governor or the legislature. It really is everyone working together to make this the best project it can possibly be, to show the world that that entrepreneurial spirit of Utah people coming together still exists, and it's something we're very proud of and can't wait to complete.
So there you go. Everything that you need to know about the point, except what I'm about to tell you. So you saw we have some local and state leadership involved in that process, and wanted to give you just a little overview of what the thinking is and what the potential is for this site. About a year and a half ago, there was an article in the Deseret News with this headline: "Why Utah has a once-in-a-generation opportunity unique to any other place in the world." That's a pretty stunning statement. And frankly, when I first saw it, I thought it was a bit of hyperbole, and I was a little nervous about what message it might convey. But as we've been working on this project, talking to people around the world, this isn't an exaggeration. This is on the map of many around the country who see it as one of the top development opportunities in our country over the next few years. We recognize that, and we recognize that with the opportunity comes a significant responsibility to make sure that we're doing things in the right way. So we've, looks like it's not allowing me to advance. Let's see. Well, here come the technical difficulties. Working this morning, but it's not allowing me to advance the slides. Okay, there we go. We'll try again. So this is a site that I think most of you are familiar with. It's currently occupied by the Utah State Prison, about 600 acres of land. It's in the elbow between Bangerter Highway and the I-15 interstate, right in the heart of Silicon Slopes, which is, you know, one of the most vibrant tech communities in the country and beyond. In between are two largest population and labor sheds, part of a growing community that is again getting national attention. Utah has been the fastest growing community or state in the country over the last 10 years or so. And we've kind of talked about this being a blank slate that we can start building on and painting on. But in reality, it's not totally. We will have 600 acres of land that are available, but there's already been a lot of work that's gone into defining what this will be, although much work left to be done in terms of details. So thousands of people, and I'll talk about this a little more later, thousands of people have been involved in giving their input, sharing their hopes for this area. The legislature took their input and identified a number of objectives in statute that guide the direction that we're heading. And it includes things like workforce development and job creation. It talks about quality of life on this site and in surrounding areas. Transportation is a big deal. Make sure that we're moving people around effectively and have top-notch transportation modes. They talked about the need to improve air quality and reduce resource use at this site. So careful with our water and our energy. Talked about collaborating with surrounding communities to make quality of life better in the region. And interestingly, they also directed us to explore a nationally recognized research center. Innovation is a big part of the ticket here. So who's involved in all of this? First of all, we are led by an 11-person board, which is established under legislation and appointed by the governor, the speaker of the House, and the president of the Senate. Our co-chairs currently are Lieutenant Governor Deidre Henderson, who replaced the previous co-chair, our new governor, Spencer Cox, and Representative Lowry Snow. Now, a lot of people will say, why in the world is Representative Snow, who's from Washington County, heading up an effort here on the Wasatch Front? And I think it sends a message. It's that this is a statewide project, and that the legislature sees this as a project that can benefit people throughout our great state. So he's very much committed to this. And in fact, earlier this week at our board meeting said this is the most important board he's ever served on. The board in total has 4 legislators, 2 local mayors, the heads of 2 relevant state agencies, the commissioner of higher education, which ought to tell you something, and private sector real estate experience. I'm the only employee of the Point of the Mountain State Land Authority, but fortunately we've got some terrific talent through consultants that is filling in my significant knowledge and talent gap. Muriel Xochimil, who you met earlier, is with X Factor Communications and helping with our outreach to the public. Aaron Talkington is with RCL Co., the nationally recognized real estate marketing firm, market research firm. They're helping us ensure that our plans are firmly rooted in market reality and that we're strategizing with the long term in mind. And Steve Kellenberg, who has a 40-year career in master planning, some of the major and cutting edge developments all over the world. And part of his career, he served as the head of design and planning for the Irvine Company, which has developed one of the most successful and arguably the largest development in the history of our country. So terrific expertise that is helping us in this process. Early on, the board identified some guiding principles to help us with our decision-making. First, foremost, and always is promote the public interest. This is a public project. It's on land owned by all of us in the state. We feel an obligation to ensure a return to the people of the state. And that is certainly an economic return, but also a quality of life return. Setting the standard, we hope that this will be a model development that will help solve some of the challenges of growth in a way that can be emulated by other developers. Thinking regionally, this is not an isolated project. We want it to work for the surrounding communities, the region, and the state. So we're thinking in those terms as we plan. Taking the long view, as the governor said in that video, it's more important to do this right than to do it fast. So we're going to move ahead and make progress, but we need to make sure that we're taking the right steps for the long-term good of our state. And because it's state land, we've got the luxury of being a little bit more patient. The last 2 are kind of process-oriented and just vital. Be open and transparent. Everything we do is out in the open. All of our meetings are live streamed and recorded. They're on our website, notes and video, so anybody can see them at any time. We want to make sure that the public's work is done with the public's knowledge and understanding. And then finally, act with integrity. In all we do, we'll operate to the highest ethical standards. So let me just kind of go through where we are in this long process. There have been discussions for many, many years about moving the state prison. And then those discussions and the decision to move the correctional facility all took place before we were created. But it laid the foundation for what's happened since. And in 2016, there was an organization formed by the legislature called the Point of the Mountain Development Commission. And this group was charged with looking at opportunities to maximize the opportunities and benefits potentially to be gained in the Point of the Mountain region. So think about kind of Sandy to Saratoga Springs. It's an area that's growing fast. It's an area with 20,000 acres that are undeveloped. And it's also part of the home to the Point. The Point of the Mountain Development Commission conducted extensive public outreach and involved like 4,200 people in many workshops and meetings, analyzed different ideas, had informed public input, and developed a vision for the Point of the Mountain region. And I'll talk about that in just a minute. The Point of the Mountain State Land Authority was created in 2018. About a year and a half later, I was hired as the first staff member, and we've been building our team, doing the research, laying the foundation, and here we are now working on the master plan for the site. We hope to have that finished by this summer, and we'll then be in a position to start implementing when the site becomes available. Now, I talked earlier about this Point of the Mountain Development Commission vision, and they did some analysis, and they said, all right, let's look at a baseline. If this area continues to grow the way it is now, what will it look like in 2050? And then they compared that with the vision that came out of their process. And they found that if we develop consistently with the vision, we would create 150,000 more high-paying jobs than we would under the baseline. That the average annual household income across the Wasatch Front would increase by $10,000 by 2050. That we would generate public revenues of over $9 billion more than with baseline development. That buys a lot of education and infrastructure and social services. We'd be able to get to and from places in the Wasatch Front region easier. Traffic would flow better, and we'd generate fewer air emissions. These are important measures, and we recognize that we've got a responsibility to help make these kinds of benefits happen for the region. We're guided by 6 key vision elements. These came out of public process, and these are concepts that we've given to our planning team, SOM, to guide their thinking. Community is about having kind of a mixed-use, vibrant, iconic community, a place where people can enjoy living, working, playing, where they can gather in the evenings and on weekends and enhance their quality of life. Transportation is a big deal. We know that this is an area that has some traffic problems, and we want to be creative in minimizing traffic generation and creating and demonstrating new transportation techniques. Economic growth, of course, is a big one, to ensure that we have the resources we need in our state, and also to allow the next generation to be able to have a world-class career right here in Utah and not have to leave to have that experience. Innovation. We want this to be a site that fits in with a broader ecosystem of innovation in our state. A place where ideas are generated, where they're commercialized, where they become real and can help us solve some of the problems we have in society, some of the challenges. Sustainability is a big deal. We want to make sure that we're working in ways that minimize air emissions, that can be replicable, and we're using fewer resources. And finally, collaboration, making sure that we're team players and working with those around us. I mentioned SOM a few times. Last fall, we went through a really extensive process to select a planning firm. Had some of the household names in this world that applied. And after a competitive, rigorous process, we selected SOM. They've been fantastic. And one of the ideas that we're exploring is Utah's first 15-minute city, which is a concept that you can essentially access anything you need during the day within a 15-minute walk.
Alan, I think you may have hit mute.
Okay, yeah, it said that I was hit. Can you hear me now?
Yes, great.
Okay, so this is our planning for the our timeline for the planning process. We've been through stage 1, which was looking at opportunities and constraints and gathering information. We're just at the tail end of stage 2, which is looking at some concepts that we can explore, and you'll hear a little bit more about those later, to identify the mix of uses and concepts that perform best and can move on to the next phase, which would be looking at developing a preferred alternative that we plan to refine and fine tune to get it just right, and then release a master plan. It's really what we're calling a framework master plan this summer. That's a plan that will outline the major elements of the site, the kinds of things we'd like to see, but is not specific and detailed site planning. That'll take place in subsequent phases. All right. So the public, this is key, and this is kind of where you come in. We've had a number of working groups that are composed of experts in our community looking at these various areas, and they've been meeting roughly monthly to provide input on everything from sustainability, the economic development, infrastructure and transportation design, education, research, and innovation. And they've been invaluable in providing direction and resources to help us get this right. In addition, we've done some public outreach through surveys, building on the work that was done by the Development Commission and making sure that we're still on the right track. So in total, we've had over 8,000 people participating to this point. So why do we need a stakeholder advisory committee? You folks. We felt that there were some gaps in our outreach, that it was important, as I said earlier, to have folks who have expertise in areas that are not necessarily covered in those working groups. People who are respected in the community, who have the ear of many in the community, and who can share a perspective with us and then maybe back out to the community that we wouldn't otherwise have. So we're going to be meeting with you a couple of times, sharing with you our thoughts and plans, gathering information at this stage, and using it to refine the plans that we'll show to you in, what is it? I think early May is our next meeting. So with that, I'm going to drop off and turn it to Peter Kindle from SOM, who's going to jump a little bit more into the details of this process. And then we'll have an opportunity for some questions. So, Peter?
Great, thank you, Alan. Can you see my screen?
Yes.
Okay, great. Let me go to full screen mode. And Alan, please, I was going to go through some of the technical background first, and then we were going to present the options to the group. But if you'd like to stop anywhere in the process, please just go ahead and stop me. So thank you all for joining us. And I do want to say what a honor it is to have you participate in this project. And I think from hearing your backgrounds and the introductions, we will be very appreciative of your contributions. I wanted to run through some of the elements that we've developed so far. I think as Alan mentioned, I'm sure everybody knows where the site is, but the project vision really is a regional vision, even a statewide vision, as Alan mentioned. And the design team is extending and building upon the work that's been done over the last several years. So we know there's been a number of visions tabled for the site, a number of public inputs that have been documented. So the planning that I'll show you today really builds off of that. We have read through different public surveys and working group contributions to the project. And I think, as Alan outlined, there's really, from SOM's perspective, 4 primary project goals. One is to create an innovation district. And this is an important point to make, is that overall, we have an innovation mission on the site. We also want to maximize economic return, and as Alan mentioned, not necessarily an early return, but making sure that there's a long-term benefit to the maximum possible extent. Third is to maximize the community benefits, and fourth, as Alan touched on, is to create a national development model. And I think that's what attracted SOM and our team to this project. Is it's really a rare opportunity to create something very, very special, not only for Utah, but nationally. So that led us to a series of principles, this idea of leading in sustainability, establishing a regional economic hub, creating a unique Utah neighborhood, and realizing specific community benefits. In the selection process that Alan mentioned, SOM and our team did put forward a series of principles that we thought were very important for the site. The first one is the unique geographic position of the site as a connector between the mountains and the river. So our first principle was to use the site as a connection, and that's a recreational connection, but also a conceptual connection between these two geographic markers for the Wasatch Front. We also prepared a series of watercolor images that showed our intentions around the design. So you see that here. These aren't meant, of course, to be final in any way, but they're just indicative of the scale and nature of the project. We also know that water is a very valuable resource all through the West, but especially in Utah. There are 2 canals that cross the site. So we want to have a very comprehensive water strategy for the project. And this can realize itself in different ways through connected open space that complements the innovation district that we're trying to build. Another interesting aspect of the site is that it's been a large piece of land that the road network has not been able to cross. So an important third principle is establishing new connections for the site to surrounding road networks. And this roadway system would, of course, establish a series of development parcels that can then be programmed around the innovation mission. As Alan mentioned, one of our key ideas was what is a relatively new concept in the planning world, but this idea of a 15-minute city, meaning everything is within a 15-minute walk. And what's very unique about this site is it happens to be the perfect size and scale for that exact idea. So this is a key element of our plan, this commitment to walkability. But also not just walkability, this idea of creating a new center here that would be comprised of buildings and civic space together. This may be a central park where there might be a performance venue or some other type of civic space. Complementing this idea of a 15-minute city is a series of smaller sub-districts that could be programmed in different ways around different development ideas. These would be within about a 5-minute walk of the center of these districts. Some of these may be more urban in nature, may be car-free, as you'll see a little bit later. Our 6th principle was around sustainability. As I mentioned, we want this really to be a national model of sustainable ideas. It also, we're anticipating, has a residential component. We want this to be a live-work community. And with 600 acres, we can accommodate that while still achieving this innovation vision. And then, of course, beginning to reintegrate the property back into the surrounding communities. So technically, the site is in Draper, but it actually touches several other communities nearby. And begin to build this idea of a innovation district with a new global presence with a workforce training. So a lot of those components you'll see a little bit later in the planning. As Alan mentioned, the advisors to the project have created these 6 vision elements, KVEs we call them. And what we've done through the last 6 weeks as we've initiated the planning process was to convert these higher level statements into actual principles for the plan. And what we're in the process of doing now is then converting those principles into specific program elements or concepts or actions that will show up in the actual plan. So you can see those on the right. So you can read those here, you know, around community, ideas of community gardens, of shared public space, I heard someone mention the missing middle housing. So introducing a lot of those ideas around transit. You can see we want to really raise the bar and provide alternate means of transportation and mobility on the site. That might be reducing parking demand, making this a pedestrian forward district, bike connections, all of those great ideas that are out there right now. We want to bring these to the project. Economic growth continues to be an important mission for the planning and development group. So at the end of the day, this has to work and function as an economic driver for the region. It has to advance innovation within Utah. So how and what constitutes an actual innovation environment. And then, as I mentioned, sustainability, and I'll share a little bit more around sustainability. We also undertook a significant research activity over the last 4 weeks. We've looked at 12 projects, not only nationally, but internationally. These are projects that have similar attributes to the point, whether it's size or mission or innovation. And I won't present the whole study, but here are some key takeaways. We've listed 12 here, 6 around innovation, what we call innovation catalysts, and 6 around just general project catalysts. So we really wanted to answer the question, what actually constitutes and catalyzes an innovation district? And in the middle, you can see what those are. So number 1 is to have an institutional affiliation. Number 2 is very important, a unique physical environment. It has to look and feel different than what's currently on the market. As probably many of you know, young tech workers like highly amenitized spaces and buildings. So providing complementary functions to the core mission of innovation. We also learned that we need an adaptable urban plan. So a plan that's developed in stages, that can be phased, but more importantly, can be modified over time. And you'll see that in the plans. Flexible floor plates, flexible building types really are important to allow companies to come in and adjust and adapt to changing technologies. And then what we're hoping to establish is a public-private and potentially institutional partnership. And this is really a development partnership, not a financial partnership, but a commitment, a shared commitment around the mission of the point. In terms of the project catalysts in general, we want to see an early completion of a signature element, a balanced mix of land uses, world-class public space, number 3, a certain density threshold, which we think is important and the project's demonstrated, connectivity to transit, and then walkability. So those are the 12 catalytic lessons that we learned. We also took an extensive look at the specific area around the site. So the GIS and demographic profile of the area. So here you see things like job density, typical housing types, what housing types might be missing. We are especially interested in food and beverage, speaking of those amenitized environments, what's currently unavailable in the immediate area. Entertainment, as you see here. And also schools. We hope that education of some sort is part of this master plan. So some of the key takeaways from our GIS work. One is that this is a fairly uniform demographic right now. So we want to have a plan that accommodates a new, perhaps demographic. Employment, that there is room in the immediate area for additional jobs, a job cluster. That housing needs to fill in that missing middle, that idea of workforce housing or more affordable options. In terms of retail, providing a stronger retail destination that also maybe has an entertainment overlay. As I mentioned, schools, maybe some additional cultural amenities in the project, and then around transit, the walkability remains a clear component that's missing. In terms of parks and open space, this is an element that has come up numerous times in public meetings. We do want to have a significant public open space program here. So to fill in that gap in the existing parks menu, and then the trail, complementing the trail networks. We know that that's an important part of the Wasatch Front mobility networks, is these regional trails. So just to wrap up this sort of analytical set, rolling all that up into what the point can be, really we want to create a very diverse environment that provides the sorts of activities that tech and innovation companies want for their workers. And that may include some of the images you see here. Certainly not all of them will show up in the final plan, but this is just a visual sort of survey of some of the elements that we might see from a development standpoint. Obviously a heavy emphasis on incubator spaces, innovation environments, conference facilities, maker spaces, and then the open space, really balancing open space from a more naturalized or habitat-rich, more natural open space with what you see in the lower right, more civic spaces that bring people together. And we're hoping some community farms that complement the residential. And then, of course, to support the young demographic and families that we hope are attracted here, additional open space ideas. And then mobility, as we mentioned, really trying to find the most innovative mobility concepts that are out there right now, with an emphasis on, of course, pedestrian and bike environments. So again, this is simply a visual survey of some of the aspects of the plan that we hope to incorporate. And Alan, I think I'll maybe just break there if you want to open it up for any further questions, or if you'd like me to keep going, I can.
Yeah, let's pause for a minute. And okay. Thank you, Peter. Again, we're going to be talking a little bit more later about some of the more detailed planning ideas, and we'll get your input on that. But at this point, wanted to just be able to open it up and see if you've got any questions on the overall mission of the organization and some of the data that we're using as a foundation for the next steps.
Alan, can I just say, Peter, I found that to be really, really impressive. And it's first time I've had a chance to look at it. And I love the vision. I love the focus on walkability and sustainability. And it sounds like those will be the next slides. One of the questions I have, and I love the direction and the public input you've been garnering, is in terms of phasing and maybe the infrastructure. Maybe I'm getting too far down into the weeds, but when you look at the road network and putting that in, do you envision that will just be put in over time? Have you had a chance to look at infrastructure costs and what's needed there and
Yeah, we
funding
have.
sources, et cetera?
Yeah, I'll share a little bit of that when we go through the options, but we're preparing a high-level cost estimate as part of this stage of work. We haven't gotten into specific phasing strategies yet. That's still in progress. Maybe Ellen wants to talk to that, but we are, of course, thinking about it now. And as we think about costs and design, we're thinking about phasing and implementation.
So within each of those squares that you were showing back on the road network, and you were saying those are, you didn't really say pad ready, but something to that effect, about how big are those? And within each of those, will they be mixed use, or will, just depending on the area?
Yeah, I can, once we go through the options, you'll see that. Right now we're actually using the Salt Lake block, which you may know is a 700 by 700 foot block, as our sort of our starting point, but we're hoping to make it much more porous than that in terms of how people can move through that size of a land area.
Okay.
You're
Other
on mute.
questions?
Hey, Ellen and Peter, this is Robin. I have a question. You made a reference to a new demographic. Will you please expand on that?
Yeah, I think I would use that in the broadest sense. I think you may know that generally the area is primarily single family homes, families that's in the immediate area of this project site. So we just want to make sure that the housing options we include can accommodate, say, new graduates, maybe early career professionals. Maybe they're not looking for a full single family home at this time, but need, affordable housing options nearby. So it's really creating space for that tech demographic, I would say.
Peter, this is Tara Rollins with Utah Housing Coalition.
Yeah.
I won't back to your example that you gave, but it sounds like we're building more of an exclusive place, not an inclusive. And I'm wondering, is there anything going into the jobs that will be needing to help this particular project survive? And I mean that by the groundskeepers, people that are going to be janitors, people that are going to be working in the food services. Is there any, conversation happening about, this particular project having, some type of inclusionary zoning, and also perhaps policies around what people are being paid? Because, somebody who is going to be able to write a business plan around, a housing wage or a living wage, it will attract people that will be able to do that. And so I just put that out there because we need housing, as I said, for the infrastructure of this particular project. When we're looking at tourism and how much money comes into our state, in regards to tourism, most of those are low-wage jobs that are welcoming other people into our state. And so we need those jobs. And so I think we should be planning for them.
Maybe I can take a stab at that. And Tara, thank you. That's exactly why we've got you here. We recognize that there's a challenge in our state with affordability. And while we haven't worked out the details, we recognize that we're trying to build a community that will allow the people that are working here to live close by. It's part of the sustainability goal. It's part of the goal of minimizing traffic in the area. And we've got limited ability to control policies, but we can influence it. And so, yes, we've had some of those conversations and they're ongoing, but as I said, that's kind of exactly why we want you and others to help us think through some of these real challenges, because we've also got an obligation to the taxpayers to make sure that they're not floating too heavy a burden. And I think there are ways that we can find that balance together. And while I don't have the answers, I think collectively we're going to find them.
And I just want to point out, low-income people are also taxpayers, so.
No question, no question. Yeah.
Ellen, a quick question about the what appears to be the dance between, you look at a 15-minute city that's inclusive of all the people that would live, work, and play there, and then its capacity to handle what is being looked at as a statewide kind of opportunity to draw people in. How is that being contemplated?
You'll see that in a minute as you start looking at different kind of studies at different scales and how we might fit those pieces together. But that is one of the tensions that we face. I mentioned earlier that there are a number of objectives that have been set out by the legislature, and they're all great, but in some instances they're competing. So we're trying to find the right balance among those things. And I think one point that's probably obvious, there are as many different visions of this site as there are people expressing those visions. And at the end of the day, we necessarily will not make everybody happy. But what we can do is listen and think and work toward that end. And so maybe more specifically to your question, we're thinking about those that are going to be living in the area, working in these facilities, and wanting to make life convenient for them. But we also think that the kinds of activities that will take place on this site will spur economic activity beyond our boundaries. That, if we've got incubator and accelerator space, Utah research can turn into Utah products and Utah companies, and will spin off and make a difference more broadly. The opportunities for people to develop in terms of education or workforce will spin off of this site and seed surrounding communities. The models that we create here for sustainability can be emulated in other parts of the state and create benefits there. So that's sort of the tension and how we're thinking about it.
Thank you.
All right, I'll tell you what, maybe we'll plow on and we will have another opportunity for some detailed conversation and ideas after we outline the. I'm sorry, pardon?
You've got one question in the chat. Is there a Senate or House bill number we can reference for this project before you move on? I'm sure there's a number of.
Well, the statute that outlines this project is Title 11, Chapter 59 of the Utah Code. So, Utah Code annotated 11-59.
I just added the link to the bill that created the Point of the Mountain State Land Authority. It's HB 372 from the 2018 Legislative General Session.
Thanks. Okay, really good questions and comments. Peter, maybe we'll turn it back to you to kind of run through the next section, and then we'll dive in with some discussion following that.
Great. So the next piece I just wanted to touch on quickly is the sustainability strategy. This is still very much in progress, but we wanted to share a couple key ideas with you. We are proposing to the Point of Mountain Land Authority of a joint sustainable strategy, which isn't illustrated here, but we're proposing actually a certification under LEED or some similar system. So that's more of an external facing certification for the project. LEED has a neighborhood development certification that is, I think this project would be quite appropriate for. We're also then proposing to Alan and his team a supplementary customization around these 5 key elements that you see here. We think these are quite important to make the sustainable strategy more specific to Utah and more specific to the Wasatch Front. So the first one really is around mobility. The second is around ecology. The third is around energy and carbon. The fourth is around water, and the fifth is around waste. So we think these are the 5 complementary or supplementary sustainable strategies we'd like to add to the basic LEED certification. And we're in the process now of defining what's
Can I
called.
ask a question?
Sure.
Now about LEED. So LEED certification is the best. I'm wondering how expensive it adds to the cost of building, because in terms of the affordable housing that we have been building with tax credits, there are other certifications that are much cheaper to be able to achieve some of the same stuff. So, my husband's an engineer, he's done buildings for LEED, and, I know that's probably preferable, but when it's coming to actually the housing pieces of it, you may want to look at
We're looking at both
model.
LEED and what's called a WELL community. And LEED ND is LEED for neighborhood development. It's a little bit different than LEED for buildings. So we're in the process of investigating the cost right now. You raise a good point that it's an unfortunate reality of the LEED process. The LEED certification is costly, but relative to the overall outlay for the project, it's actually quite a small percentage, and we just think having that sort of public-facing certification really sets the bar for making this a national model. But no final decisions have been made yet about whether it's a LEED submission or some other system.
Peter, may I chime in for just 2 seconds? And we do a lot of real estate development, commercial buildings, and we typically, in fact, I think in almost all of our buildings, we get a LEED, some various level of LEED certification.
Right.
And depending on the commissioning or whatever, it's not cost prohibitive. We may spend a couple $100,000 or less, but
right.
We feel it's worth it. Now, whether or not it's designed to it and you don't go ahead and certify it would be up to your group to decide if you want to do that. But there are other less expensive measures and criteria that can be there.
And not to derail us, but a quick question on the national model goal. Is that relative to make it attractive to recruit, or is there other reasons why being a national model would be important to Utah?
I think, I use the term national model a little bit loosely. I think as Alan spoke, this is such an important and unique opportunity. So there's no, official benchmark for what constitutes a national model. We see it actually as potentially a national model, like maybe if you're familiar with the Stapleton project in Colorado, kind of set a bar for redevelopment around residential projects 10 or 15 years ago. We're hoping this can be set a new bar around tech innovation and office development, mixed use development. But I think more importantly, we want it to be a model for Utah and for the Wasatch Front. So is there a different way to build on the Wasatch Front that starts to really physically show and demonstrate how these unique and more sustainable ideas can be built. So one element that keeps coming up over and over again in many of our meetings and conversations is the idea of traffic and air quality. So that's why we've made mobility the first sustainable component to which we would hopefully rise above a national standard or some sort of a agreed certification standard. This again is still in development, but we're setting the key performance indicators on the right-hand side. We also hope that it can become an example for ecological restoration through the open space system. That we think is a really important concept for Utah and for the Wasatch Front. Resource depletion around energy and carbon. So again, having this, whether it's the whole district or individual buildings, setting perhaps slightly higher standards for the district or buildings. Maybe that includes some sort of centralized facility that serves the whole district. We're still looking at the cost and phasing implications of what something like that would do, but having very robust goals around energy and carbon reduction. Water, as I mentioned, water efficiency, water management, water conservation. We're hoping to potentially even have a gray water reuse strategy for the site, having porous pavers throughout, reestablishing wetlands on the site. There's actually some wetlands there now, but extend and complement what's there. And then a solid waste strategy. One of the benefits of having a large plot of land like this is you can create and implement more holistic recycling strategies, waste management strategies. So we hope to really raise the bar on that component. So again, these are the 5 pillars of our complementary or supplementary sustainability strategy that will complement whatever certification that we move forward with. And then making sure we connect with all the agencies and organizations that are doing similar work. We want this to be very much a Utah project and the sustainable framework to be specific to this place. So I wanted to move next to the framework plan alternatives. As Ellen mentioned, the goal for this master planning work is to create a framework plan. A framework plan really is establishing roads, parcelization, and open space attributes for the plan, and then as the and buildings and things like that. We are proposing and working with RCLCO, who's our economic consultant, on 3 programming ideas. And these are somewhat related to the GIS study I showed you earlier, but the first one on the left is what we call a complete community, and that's really looking at a 1-mile radius from the center of the site and saying how would we design this site to meet the needs of this immediate area. The second one, number 2, is what we're calling a regional hub. This is really looking beyond that immediate area of the site and extending and looking into what the communities may benefit from through the redevelopment. And then the third one is what we're calling an innovation hub or an innovation center. And that's really looking regionally at a wider catchment or influence area. And I do want to say these are not meant to be in opposition to each other. These are really just exploratory programming ideas for the design and development teams to understand what the site is best suited for. So these are just a little bit of statistics on each plan. we are maintaining 15 million square feet as our target development area, and that's consistent across all 3 sites. What we're modifying is the development area. So you can see the innovation one, number 3, has the highest amount of development area. And then the other variable that we've introduced is the balance of residential and commercial GFA. We do know that having a balanced land use plan between residential and GFA does reduce traffic. So it's really a question of how much, what is the balance. So as I mentioned, number 1 is really looking at this near impact or close-in impact of the site and what's missing in this immediate area. So the idea of a complete community really is maybe closely aligned with what we talked about earlier, this 15-minute city. Is there the appropriate land use balance whereby off-site trips are reduced, people can generally meet their needs on site? Can they move through the site? So that's what the land use plan really is intended to do, is this idea of balance. We have started.
I have a question with that. How are you coordinating with the adjacent jurisdictions? I assume there's probably some changes in development patterns already occurring next to the point. So in order to complete the 15-minute city, you're going to attract some competing interest surrounding point.
Right.
So are there any, I'm sure there's some discussions going along already right now with that.
Yeah, we have had conversations with Bluffdale and other adjacent communities. I think, one area that's of particular interest to us is sort of these surrounding areas that are actually touching the site, touching the boundary of the site. So we have been in some very early discussions with some of the surrounding landowners to communicate and hear what they have to say about their plans for their properties. So yeah, there is an ongoing and extensive outreach program with a lot of different stakeholders, some of which are property owners in the immediate area. What you see here is a very simple delineation of the development plan. So the gray represents development parcels, the white are the roads, and the green are the open space system. This illustrates 6 development districts. The central one was what we call the hub, and then that's complemented by a series of other districts around it. In terms of the road network for this particular option, you can see those here in black lines. We're also hoping there's substantial car-free zones in between these road areas. And we have tried to create as many external connections, which are indicated by the red circles, as possible to reduce the traffic load on existing intersections. Another element of all of the plans, which you'll see, is our transit and microability plans. So the pink line represents the BRT system that is planned to be implemented and connect through the site. I think some of you are aware of that. This will extend further north up to the Draper station on the front runner, which is just off the image here. So this BRT system, which will come through the site, and there's 2 stations, one here and one here, is critically important to providing equitable access for the workers and employees of the project, as well as the residents. The yellow line represents a micromobility strategy. So this would be separate from the road network and would be designed along some of the green corridors. So it might be an electric vehicle, it may be a dedicated bikeway. We're still looking at that. But the key idea here is that that's offset and opposite from the road network. So disconnecting micromobility from automobile traffic is a key idea. In terms of land use, you can see here the preliminary land use designations. Blue represents office or commercial, red is retail, and brown generally represents residential. So as I mentioned, this one has the highest percentage of residential of all three options. So you can roughly see the approximation of where that would sit. We have indicated the different residential types in the map as well. We are in the very early stages of understanding the vertical density. As I mentioned, it's about 15 million square feet. So here you see how that may play out on the actual site. We are generally looking at building heights between 3 and 4 stories on average, but what we are intending to do is bring certain building heights up higher at key areas, especially connected to the BRT system, which is shown here in red, so that access to the BRT is very easy to the highest density areas. Here you can also see in green the open space network. Now this option uses a more linear open space idea with that emphasis on connectivity and recreation. The second option is what we call the regional hub. As I mentioned, this really has a 4-mile catchment area. So we're now getting into Bluffdale, Riverton, Draper, and Lehigh. So we had to really understand what was happening in the adjacent communities and what the programming would be to complement those existing land uses. So this one's really is a little bit different in terms of it introduces 2 attractors to the plan. One would be a retail and an entertainment hub, and then the other would be a larger open space component, more of a regional park. So here you see the preliminary plan for this option. You can again see that connector that links the river to the range that I mentioned earlier. This would be a more naturalized open space, and then it's complemented by more traditional city parks, things like that. In terms of the road network, it's similar to all of the options actually have a similar density of roads with the car-free areas indicated in the middle here. We tried a different idea for micromobility in this one. This we're calling kind of our bike superhighway, which would link up all the open space systems. So you could actually move through the park again, separate from the road network. Sorry, move through the project separate from the road network. You could live on one side of the development and work on the other side and be able to ride your bike to work. And then, of course, you can always walk along the street networks. The BRT alignment's slightly different, but similar layout. Because this is a more of a regional hub, it does have a larger component of retail, which you can see here in red. We've also introduced an institutional anchor. If you recall, our takeaways from the analog study indicated that an institutional affiliation is an important part of the project. You can also see more blue on this plan, which is commercial, office, and other types of innovation-related commercial functions. The purple square indicates a potential school. That's located on the western side of the plan that would complement and be supported by the residential areas. Here you see a vertical development of that option with a little more density along the BRT line. So that is a little further north. You can see that taller building there. That's about maybe a 10 to 12 story building. That's probably about as high as the project will go, just because of the demand for development in the area. The third option is what we call the Innovation Center. And again, this really is the most broad-reaching in terms of its aspirations for economic development, and would really complement Provo and Salt Lake as potentially a third type of focused development area. And the primary driver of this one really is maximizing the development capacity of the site. So this has the highest amount of developable land. You can see that here in the gray parcels. Again, the white is roads, the green is open space. A more traditional open space idea, but still you can see a connection that kind of links through the site and connects over to the Jordan River. It has a more traditional Central Park idea, and that could be a park that in which we have concerts and things like that. The interesting thing about this one is it actually lends itself quite well to larger car-free zones. So again, very walkable cores here for the project. And the micromobility concept here would be to link all of the neighborhoods together with this autonomous shuttle. So you can actually use that shuttle to get to work or connect to the BRT route. So those are the three options. The land use plan for number 3 is quite interesting. Now here you can see a larger commitment to institutional affiliations. And by institutional affiliation, we don't mean a college campus. That's not the intention here. It's simply the presence of one or perhaps several institutions, whether it's an educational institution or a research institution or even medical related, to join us in the development vision for the site around innovation and research and product development. We also, in this option, complemented that with what we're calling an innovation accelerator. Now, this has been located on the north end of the site and maybe more focused on product development, research and development, and more perhaps even light manufacturing of different components of an innovation district. This has the smallest percentage of residential development. And again, you can see a public school may be located at that western side. This is the vertical development of this option. And again, these buildings are not meant to be final in any manner. It's really just what we call a test fit. So just taking the projected GFA or gross floor area and putting it onto the parcel, so we get a sense of how much development there will be. So I think I'd like to stop there and we can open it up to questions. Happy to go back to any of the drawings to talk in more detail about the concepts.
Thank you, Peter. Appreciate that. And thanks to all of you for your patience. We thought it was important that you kind of get a sense for what we're thinking. Let me just emphasize one thing, and then I'll see if there's some comments and questions. And that is, we don't know what our preferred alternative is going to look like yet. Consider these ideas as studies. You know, before an artist starts painting, brings out the sketchbook and kind of gets a sense for where different things could go and the composition of the painting. And that's kind of what we're doing here, is just exploring ideas. Anything on one of these little sketches could be included in another one. So there's a lot of flexibility still. But we're interested in hearing from you and getting any overall sense you have. And let me just first put it out generally, and then maybe we can go into some detail on what land use ideas you like, what transportation, et cetera. But to begin with, what questions or initial thoughts do you have on some of these ideas?
Can I just ask again, maybe something connected to my last question in terms of how people would come in and then take advantage of the site relative to its walkability, even I guess I'd have to think that it's contemplated that there would be parking structures of some sort that would enable, if I was coming from Provo or Salt Lake, that I would know where to go, and then I could then take advantage of that.
That's right. I mean, this will be a place that is visited from people throughout the region. And we do have parking strategies in each of these different concepts would allow people to come in and use structures. And we've talked about those car-free zones in the middle, but they'd be designed so that if somebody were traveling in, they could access a place to park nearby and then walk into the middle zone. We also want to make this as attractive to transit users as possible. And I guess another point I'd make is that in terms of affordability, and we're looking at household affordability, and by having the circulators go through this system, people could, I think, easily get around this site without a car, or they could have one car for longer trips, but may not need multiple. And so that contributes to affordability as well as minimizing the traffic impacts.
Alan, you have a question in the chat from Mike Haythorne about sort of the idea of what we mean when we're talking about maximizing revenue, or maybe how we're managing maximum revenue with community benefit. So I don't know if you want to talk about that a little bit.
And I think, as I said, the better word is optimize. As I indicated before, there are a number of competing objectives at this site. And so there's a little bit of art involved in making sure that we're providing a return on the public dollars, but also making sure that we're creating those social quality of life benefits. And it's not an easy thing because there's a cost involved up front in some of the infrastructure to improve sustainability. But we think there's value there overall. And so the board will be working through some of those tough decisions. And frankly, we'd welcome your input on that question. What is the right balance among all these different objectives that we've been given?
To that point, wordplay is extremely important because there's a big difference from a strategical standpoint. There's a big difference between maximizing and optimizing. So I'm really glad to hear you say optimize is really the objective as opposed to maximize. Because if the strategy is maximizing revenue and maximizing community benefit, there are things that you're going to have to compromise on which are different than if the strategy is to optimize. Which is why I raised the question. So I'm pleased to hear you pivot and say that it really needs to be about optimize, but ultimately it is a wordplay issue that ought to be changed because maximize is a different message.
It's a good point. Fully agree. Thanks, Mike.
Yeah, Alan, I have just a quick thought. I think all the plans look like they'd be really outstanding and be welcomed into any community. The thing I was thinking about is as you develop this plan, it may not be bad. It might not be that difficult of a task just to show that you have the tax revenues so things are sustainable. So the school district shows that the kids that are coming off of this are going into schools that are okay. And then you have the policing and the maintenance for the roads and storm drains. So as a municipality, or whether you have an HOA or however this thing is finally maintained, you show that the ongoing sustainable revenue, the property taxes or the sales tax or however that goes, allows it to function in a fabric of a community that's there and not having to be subsidized in some fashion. But easily all these plans you have look like they would achieve that fairly easily. I don't think that's going to be a difficult task, but I think when you go to sell it to a community to take over the garbage collection or the dog pound things, all those things would be easily to show that any community would want to embrace those kinds of things.
Gordon, you sound like an economic development director in a community nearby.
Yeah, cities. I didn't see a lot of city. Probably should bring that up because this is an exciting project, and the stuff I brought up is pretty mundane.
Oh,
so
no, on the contrary, that's exactly the kind of thing to bring up, and I'm glad you did. And we absolutely recognize that. And this site is all within Draper city limits. So we've been having conversations with them about how we pay for services and those kinds of things. And as part of our initial back of the envelope calculations on what the infrastructure is going to cost, we're also looking at what the revenues might be so that we can go to the state and go to the local communities, and they can know exactly what this means long term. So it's a very important point. Thank you.
Alan, may I follow up a little on that? Because I was thinking, as you look at this plan and you think for it to come together the way it's envisioned, plans like this, they're great. And I know the planning's great, everything's great, but is there an economic driver to get this critical mass, meaning kind of like what's the plan, this superpower, so to speak, of this project? Is it in a TIF? Is it RDA dollars that can come back? Because going 12 stories on buildings or high rise are fairly expensive, which push rents up, and which would mean they'd probably be a little higher than they would in the surrounding area. Maybe talk to me a little bit about some of the economic modeling and assumptions.
That's the other purpose of this stakeholder advisory committee. We're asking you to each donate to this project to make it happen. I'm kidding. Yeah. It's a great question, and those are issues that we're dealing with now with the legislature, because there needs to be a revenue model, and I would expect that there would be a special assessment district that would help pay for the infrastructure on this site. The concept being that those that benefit most from the infrastructure should be helping to pay for it and cover those costs, not and minimizing the impact to the broader taxpayer base as a whole. So I would, again, expect that there will be some kind of assessment area that we would be bringing in private investment into this and likely some bonding that would allow us to pay for it over time through some of those revenues that come in once the project starts developing. But the specifics of all of that, which are very, very important, are in process.
Okay.
If I could make a suggestion to add one additional layer for the planners, and that's a mental wellness layer. One thing we've been doing a lot of research on is what helps alleviate mental health in urban communities. And so that's kind of what I'm looking at when I look at the overlay here. There are things like intramural sports. There are things like jogging tracks. Getting out and walking is good, but getting the heart rate up is really, really good. Another thing that we've studied a lot for our communities is water therapy. And if there's a canal going through or a river going through, is there a way to have an interactive cold plunge where after someone runs a mile, they can step under the natural water and cool off, which is shown to release endorphins. I would be very interested if a mental wellness layer could be added, given how much time people spend inside. I imagine these will be tech workers, researchers who don't see the light of day too often. Just a suggestion.
That's a great idea. Thanks, Stephen. And yeah, we think that this has to be more than just passive space, but there will be opportunities for active fields to play in, a place where someone could get on a bike and connect to the Jordan River Parkway, ride forever, come back. Contemplative spaces among the buildings. But let me just ask you, I know we talked earlier about, kind of well building or well community standards. And I'm not familiar with all the details, but is any of that encompassed within those kinds of standards?
Yeah, I mean, from my perspective, getting the heart rate up, and I know it sounds a little basic, but any activity that increases and elevates the heart rate does wonders for mental health. Now, that's not to say we shouldn't have lots of great walking space. I think what they've designed is beautiful, but a way to add activity, and I think that's a draw to Utah. When people come out here, they think mountain biking, skiing, kind of some of these higher end activities, but also social activities like intramural sports or pickleball courts. Taking a comprehensive view of activity, I think puts us in a unique space given our culture of this state is activity.
Yeah, I love that. And we have talked about pickleball courts and active recreation. I'd be interested, what do others think? We've talked about open space here, and open space has got to be an element to create that kind of quality of life and attract the best talent to the area. But there are different kinds of open space. We've just talked about active areas with courts and fields. We've talked about trails, natural areas, just green space, agriculture, any, even plazas that, where you could go and listen to a street performer. Any thoughts on the right mix of those types of open space at this site?
One thought is, I know Corner Canyon High School has about 500 kids on their mountain biking team. And so any connection you're able to get also up to the Draper bicycle park up there, not just looking at the Jordan River, but also going to the ranges is also going to be, whether it's hiking or walking. And going up those elevations will accelerate your heart a great deal. So that could add to that. And the one other thing I was going to mention that our community, and it seems a lot are missing, and this one you might want to also look at, strangely enough, dog parks are a big deal for people living in apartments. So you might want to include something for that.
Yeah, great idea. And yeah, we want to raise heart rates through exercise, not by being stuck in traffic and yelling at the guy next to you, right? So that's the other side of it.
So I had a question about cars and want to know if you're thinking about having access to shared vehicles. I mean, I think that is something that is really, people don't necessarily want to have a car, but they need to have a car sometimes. And so I'm just curious to hear if you're doing that.
We are, and thank you for that question. Couldn't agree more. And I think that's kind of the trend where we're heading. There are a lot of folks who project that in the next 5 to 10 years, private car ownership is going to be dwindling rapidly, and we'll be looking much more at shared models. So yes, we're exploring what that looks like. We've even started talking about building vertiports into this site to accommodate Uber Elevate and the air taxis that will probably be part of our community within 10 or 15 years while this is being developed. So transportation needs to be much more about what we're using today, or much less about what we're using today, much more about what will make sense in the future economically and technologically. So,
and my other question would be, are you going to have underneath like trails like that people can, walk from building to building underground? Any?
We haven't talked about that very much. And those are design details that'll probably be addressed in district level planning once we get some of the private sector in place. So a little more technical than we're going to address in a framework master plan. But yeah, I think that's a great idea. Tell me a little bit more about what you're thinking and the benefits.
Well, I'm just thinking, like, if you're going to have a convention center, you would have hopefully transportation under the road to the hotel. And whether you're going to have a cluster where people can't drive, but they're able to possibly, walk underground, because our weather is so crazy that I think it would be a benefit for not the whole place, but I think it would be appropriate in some settings.
Thank you. Yeah, it's a great idea.
I had a question about the schools. I noticed that there were 3 sites for schools, but I can't remember exactly which ones, where they were located, and if it had been comprehended about like the advantage to keeping the school site near the park, near open space, so there could be a combination use for the students there.
Yeah, absolutely. I think we'd love to see that happen. I think I think at least 2 of the options had it next to open space, but we'll make sure that that's a very close adjacency.
And a couple of things that we've talked about is putting them in a place where kids can get to school by walking along these green linear parks and not have to get on major roads. And another piece is, we would imagine that schools at this site will look a little different from what we typically see in our community. Not big and spread out with a lot of grass around them, but maybe a little more of an urban feel. And the local school districts have expressed an interest in looking at some different models that would use less land, but maybe be more effective in the educational pursuits.
And I think daycares.
Pardon, daycare?
Yeah, daycare.
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure.
In fact, one of the first groups that came and talked to me within weeks after I started was, we need daycare in this area. You got to make it easier on people to work. And so that's been on my agenda from the very beginning. Yeah, good point.
Or even when you're attracting businesses to the area, having them have that within their business, so people can take advantage of it.
Absolutely.
So Alan, this is Robin. Getting back to your original question about open space, or however you're framing that, I think of that more as living infrastructure. So the term open space is largely associated, especially in Utah, with traditional parks. That's lawn and trees and rather structured, developed landscape. So I would want this area to be a living landscape. And I didn't quite get, I don't know if somebody mentioned the number of residents versus employees. There were percentages, but not solid numbers. But regardless, every one of the people that comes onto this city is going to have to eat, right? So people are eating machines. We probably eat more than we need to eat. But when I think in terms of resilience and regeneration and the responsibility of how we're developing a legacy for the future, we talked a lot about energy, and you talked about a little bit about water, using gray water. But what if the situation were that this site produced all of the food that would be consumed for residents, visitors, and workers as part of that living infrastructure?
It's an interesting idea. We haven't gone that far.
I know that's getting down into detail, getting more into design detail, but I was wondering if you're going to have some CCRs, or how will you define the possibilities for developers and individuals coming into this site in terms of what your expectations are in terms of the development standards? A meadow is a much more productive living infrastructure than lawn. We're accustomed to looking at lots of green things. I see Aaron has green in his background, and that catches my eye, but that's not Utah, except for a small window of time. And so, I think we really need to think about that, redefining this living infrastructure as part of the integration of whether it's a well building, the building could have the living infrastructure, interior and exterior. Every space around a building should be somehow contributing to water resource, air quality resource, and at least food production. So I'm asking for you to set a high bar.
Yeah, you are, and get a return off of it. So these are really interesting ideas, Robin, and I'd love to explore them further. There's no question that building in resilience, as you talked about, is important, giving people a sense of place and permanence. And we have talked about having urban gardens in the area. One of the challenges that we face on this site is the high voltage transmission lines that run through the site that can't develop under there. And so looking at productive ways of using some of that space. And so these are interesting ideas. I think it's something that we're writing down and can pursue.
Vertical gardening is something for the future. Peter, you're probably familiar with vertical farming. Actually, it's not gardening, vertical farming. That's a type of development. And if you're thinking about innovation and you're thinking about the future, and to Tara, am I saying your name correctly? Not Tara, Tara. Tara's inquiry about who is this place for? When you use the word opportunity, who is the opportunity for? Is it for the future farmer who is farming in a vertical in a building, or which is technology? And is that person living nearby? And are they feeding their neighbors? Are they feeding the restaurant owner? These are important questions. And I really hope that we can at some point start to drill down into who is the opportunity for. When I hear demographics about buildings, I'm not sure that I'm hearing opportunity for more people.
Thank you, Robin. Appreciate that. Shivam, am I pronouncing that right?
Yeah, that's perfect. Hey, I wanted to make a comment on the high power lines. So we have a few developments down in Bluffdale and West Jordan sides, and some of our land is underneath, is adjacent to the Rocky Mountain heavy power lines. So we approached Rocky Mountain Power, and I have a contact over there, and we said, hey, what if we just build a parking lot underneath your power line? And they love that idea. So we have a 100-year lease at 3 of our projects down in Bluffdale, where we are putting, we're fencing the entire road. I mean, I can share some materials after this meeting, but Rocky Mountain Power loves it. They're like, we are not going to use this land either way. So why don't you guys do whatever you need? So there's a lease, and there's a 100-year lease we can do with them, unlimited time, and we can, either build a parking lot, fence it around, put cameras there. So there are some criteria that we need to meet, but it's a good way to utilize some of the land underneath the power lines.
Thank you. Appreciate you sharing that. It's some,
great.
Thoughts along the lines that we've got a challenging aspect of the site, but it can be put to productive use and benefit the people that live there and beyond. So thank you for sharing that. Other thought? Any thoughts about transportation, what's been outlined, how we ought to be thinking about it, connecting internally and externally? One of the things we're looking at is working with Utah State on their inductive wave technology, which charges vehicles as they drive around the site. So you don't need to plug them in. They don't need to be pulled offline. They can be smaller batteries. anything with
Alan?
respect to the linkage?
Maybe
there?
along the external, it really changes how people come to a site, like when the University of Utah or BYU gives out or makes it a reduced cost for UTA passes, they seem to be utilized a lot better, and even like bigger businesses downtown. So if some of the larger users, part of their rent is providing passes for their people that maybe live off site, that might, if you just, or a discount, maybe if they have some skin in the game, there's a chance you use it. But I think that has done a lot in places where even some of your secretarial pool, that it's expensive to buy those passes, they can now afford them easier and they can get into the site if they're not living on site. So trying to make it more affordable to use UTA in and out.
Yeah, I think that's an important idea. If we want people to use transit, we have to make it convenient and affordable. And those are terrific ideas. Thank you.
Also, like when people are building, housing people can afford, they are also putting in the green bikes right there in their facility. So that's a good thing. But I want to go back to Robin's comment about the food, and maybe this is an opportunity for Alan, you to, look at, or others in that area. There's a lot of farms that are being sold for, to build housing on, and there's still farmland down there. And so we have an opportunity really to be able to, purchase one and to maintain it as the farm, as well as putting, housing along that. And that just becomes such a great community asset, where they have, farmers market, etc. And so if you hear of or see in that area, I think that would be a big asset.
And I like the use of the term asset, because it is in a number of ways. It has some landscape and sustainability functions. It has open space and aesthetic, but it's also part of the community's self-sufficiency, and it's part of a local economy, and it's part of a sense of place and connection to the land. And I think it's unfortunate that we're losing so much land. There are strong economics that are very, very difficult to deal with, but you're right. If there were a public commitment, that may be an opportunity. Thank you.
I look at that as an educative piece as well. And I feel like that is missing in the plan, just from my viewpoint, the opportunities for educative experiences. So like if you have a farm, then that provides a really great place for a lot of learning to go on. It's also, your positioning there on the Jordan Trail is pretty incredible. I can see hundreds of people riding their bikes and their families to a farmer's market on every Saturday morning in this place. If you became the place that people would get up on Saturday morning and ride to, they would come, because we're looking for that in our families. We're looking for purposeful reasons to exercise together and to go and to do healthy things together, like buy fresh produce together. There's a need for that in our communities. These educative experiences that combine with recreative experiences. I also feel that way about like botanical type gardens. As I was talking about the school before, and you mentioned urban, I'm laughing because I grew up in Detroit. I was raised in Michigan. So for you to use the word urban school in some kind of a positive light is really twisting my brain, my paradigm a little bit. But I understand. I agree. I don't know if you stated this, but I feel like some of the big acreages around our schools are completely not utilized at all. I mean, the kids go out there and run on them for maybe a few minutes a day, and that's it. But if we can use the same commitment to the space for educative reasons, such as botanical walking gardens that the kids learn to label throughout seasons, throughout different growing cycles and things like that. I mean, and not just kids at a school. I mean, families who live in the area can benefit from an educative experience, and parents are looking for those kinds of experiences with their families that have more meaning than just recreational. They're looking for educative experiences as well. And so going beyond, but as you have companies that come, if you have an educative component, a layer to this development, and you allow businesses to bring their ideas. So let's say I'm building a technology company. I dedicate some space somewhere in there for a technology walk for families to come through, where they can, it's almost like a museum experience, but these are interactive museum experiences. You may have seen, they have them in Europe, they have them. And if you go in and you walk with your family on a Saturday morning, it's free, the companies provide it, and you learn stuff. Parents, I think, are looking for educative experiences and recreational experiences, but it takes a whole community mindset to look at all of our space and say, what can we learn here? What can we teach here? What can we experience here together? So anyway, I'm excited about all the ideas. Hope we can build more education into it.
Thank you. I really appreciate that idea of sort of a community living classroom in a way, where education is just a part of the design and a part of the programming and the way of life. And we have had some conversations along those lines. We said that if we're going to have an incubator system, that there ought to be an after-school program where you can go in and work with companies and students can learn. And we've had good conversations that have started between the university and public education about a K through 16 program focused on technologies that would give them practical experiences on the site. But you've kind of gone beyond that with the gardens, the opening up opportunities within private sector businesses and exploring that education piece. And I think it fits in so well with the notion of innovation learning, advancing knowledge to solve society's challenges. Thank you.
One more thing about that. Sorry.
No, that's fine.
I remember, like, I don't know, maybe 10, 15 years ago, I was at Murray CDBG hearing, and there was a group of parents there that had adult children, and they wanted to start a greenhouse in Murray Park to supply the flowers that Murray Park would use. And I just will never forget that, because, people have skills still, and they need to be out in the community and part of the community. And I think, we need to also think about the disabled and seniors, etc. But I will never forget that. So maybe that's something to, work into, instead of, going out to, the florist or, the garden shop, you have your own within that area.
Yeah, very nice idea. Thank you. Well, listen, we've hit our scheduled time, and let me just wrap up with something. And then if a few of you have some other comments, I see that there's another hand raised. I'm willing to stick around for a few minutes and visit some more. But for those of you that need to go, thank you so much for your participation. These are terrific ideas, good interaction. Our next meeting is scheduled for April 15th. And at that meeting, we will have kind of a preferred alternative direction that we're heading. So we'll be taking some of the concepts learned from these studies that we've talked about today, taking some of the ideas that you've shared and our other working groups have shared, incorporating them into a more defined draft plan. And so I think that'll be a great time for us to dive in a little more specificity on some of the details. We threw a lot at you today, and it's unfair to say, listen for an hour and then respond, but you've done it in a really effective way that's been helpful. So with that, I think we'll close the meeting, but if there are a couple of questions and comments, I'm happy to stick around for a minute and gather those, but I didn't want to keep everybody over time. So thank you very much. Take care.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Siobhan, you got your hand up.
Yeah. I don't know if this was a redundant comment, but did you guys see on 123rd here on Draper, Tesla put in a bunch of charging stations. And I read in an article a couple months ago that all the gas station guys are moving into putting charging stations in them. So as far as transportation is concerned, we could reach out to Tesla or, whoever is providing service and putting charging stations. I think they are not for free, but there's some treaty somewhere. And one of us, and if that's me, I'm happy to do that. But we could reach out and see how we can, help the goal of going all electric by 2030.
Yeah, thank you. We agree. We've been talking a lot about the transition to electric, and one of the little performance indicators we had was that at opening, maybe this accommodate, 20% of the vehicles would be electric or something along those lines. So it's very much aligned with our thinking toward the future. And so that's a nice idea. And I'll have to keep my eyes open next time I go down 123rd and take a close look at that. But yeah, we have had conversations about when we get to the right point, we'll have to start reaching out to partners who can help build in this infrastructure. Good thought.
Awesome. Robin, you're on mute.
Yeah, I was going to say, Robin, you.
Unmuted. This project seems to be all about the future, and I assume it's 50 to 80. It's a 50 to 80 year out from whatever the flag goes down process. So when I think about transportation, I think of nothing but autonomous vehicles at this point. We're just in this small window of time where we're still driving our own vehicles. So I would hope that as much as is possible, and this is to the economic advantage of the project, less gray infrastructure. It won't be necessary. And I don't even know, if you've had a focus group on that futurist, which is now thinking about autonomous transportation and what that means. We'll certainly have electric vehicles in our near-term future, but it is not in the future of anybody's grade school child right now to be driving their own vehicle.
I think you're right. That's where we're heading. And but we don't know exactly what the future is going to look like. And that's why the watchword of our planning here is flexibility, to make sure that we can accommodate those changes into the future. And I love that point. I think it's got to be our watchword, because if we plan based on what we know today, we could unintentionally foreclose some better opportunities down the road.
Yeah, so that overbilling on roads and things of that nature, that's expensive on the upfront end, and it's expensive in the long run, and we probably won't need that. And then I was also thinking about making sure we use, us able-bodied folks that can see well and mobilize well, use the term active transportation quite a lot, but what that means in terms of everybody's mobility, again, mobility versus active transportation, are just things that I think will help the project be more complete. Not everybody walks, not everybody sees well. And, as much as I love and enjoy and appreciate my very active mobile lifestyle, whether that's tennis or biking or swimming or whatever, that is not the reality for everybody. And I would hope that comes up to the top of the list. It is also an area of innovation. And again, thinking about the future and who we include and who gets cut out because of the way that we define, frame, plan, and design.
Thank you. Yeah, so, and I love the word community. It's got to work for our community, and that's defined broadly. Thank you. Okay, Thanks so much. Really appreciate the input and ideas. It's helpful. We've written them down, we've recorded them, and we'll be giving them some careful consideration as we move into the next phase. Thanks, everybody.